People can retain that excitement of learning, the desire to take on challenges, the resilience. Sometimes it is a little like flipping a switch, but more often there is a journey that we have to take. Yes, we need to make a conscious effort every day to improve, to say, what am I learning? What are my goals?
Hello, Sales Nation. I am Will Barron, host of the Salesman Podcast. On this episode, we have Carol Dweck, and she has a Ph.D. She is clearly one of the world's leading experts in motivation. She's the author of Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. And what we're talking about is this concept of fixed versus growth mindset. It makes total sense. And I genuinely think it's going to be really useful for you. I've taken a lot away from this episode, and there's been a lot of things to think about of how much risk I'm taking in my life, both in business and just in life in general, because clearly this topic spills over just the world of sales. And with all that said, let's jump straight into the show. No messing around today, guys. Let's jump straight in. Hey, Carol, and welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I'm really glad to have you on. I'm really excited about this conversation we're going to have, and I think there's going to be a lot of value in this for the audience. And I want to start off, and this is going to be a long-ish intro, so bear with me. It'll make sense, I'm sure. But something that really intrigues me, and with my science background and all that, is that 100,000 years ago, most humans, or whatever you want to class us as at that point in time, clearly had grit. They had somewhat of a success mindset in that they had to physically survive what was going on. So clearly the fittest and the best were going to survive, and through evolution and all that. At some point, probably after World War II, things perhaps in the Western world got slightly easier. There's more the ability to coast. And so people perhaps that would have been successful had the options to not be quote unquote successful in whether it's work or whether it's charity work or whatever they're going to do. And where I'm going with this is that where I want to start with the conversation is success in your DNA? In which case we should all have it, because 100,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, you had to have grit, drive, determination to be successful, to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all should have those genes. Or is it more complex than that? And not necessarily nature, nurture, but is it something that you develop over time as an individual?
Yes, we all have the potential to succeed. Just watch little babies. They're eager, they're excited to learn, they're thrilled when they learn. They take on challenges constantly and keep at it till they get it right. I think as we grow up in our modern culture, we start thinking, am I good at this? Will I humiliate myself? Will I look bad in the eyes of others? Will I think less of myself if I make a mistake? Or I had a setback and everyone saw it. What does that mean about me? So it's kind of a luxury to have the kind of education we have and the kind of opportunities for self-reflection, but often people turn it on themselves and limit their potential.
Okay, well, I want to dive into that because I think there's two things to look at. With the education that we've got, and we're talking specifically about the Western world, obviously not everyone, and we've got to be grateful for it, not everyone is in the situation and circumstances that we have generally over here. I appreciate that. Does that make us soft to a certain extent? Does that blunt the success and the drive that you have as a child, in that there is an easier path? And so I guess, do we want to naturally just take the easier path because it's safer? And I guess, and I don't want to stick around on this evolution principle, but I guess, is it easier to reserve your energy and resources rather than push yourself out there? Is that one side of it? Or is it that because of society and culture at that young age, as you alluded to then, you become more conscious of what other people think, and so that's holding you back?
I don't think education has to make us soft and hold us back, but I think there's a kind of education where the kids are over-tested and over-evaluated and compared to each other that makes a lot of kids opt out. They are creating this competition. The education system, they think, is creating this competition, this game. And I'm not a winner in this game. I don't want to be part of it. But even the kids who are winners in the game are not excited. They're not dreaming big. They're thinking about the next A level or O level, or what school they're getting into. They're not thinking about taking on the world and changing it, making a contribution, making it a better place.
So is our success then, we'll come on to sales and business specifically in a minute, but in the bigger picture, is our success then just blunted over time? What I'm getting at is, are we born successful and it's eroded by culture, education, your parents? Or are we born just neutral and people who then develop and become super successful, and that obviously means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But are those people, is it an active process that you have to consciously do, or is it something that's been taken away from us?
Yeah, so people can stay babies in a good way. People can retain that excitement of learning, the desire to take on challenges, the resilience, the grit, if they stay in a particular mindset. I call it a growth mindset. It's the idea that your talents and abilities can be developed through hard work, good strategies, lots of input, suggestions, advice, mentoring from others. People who can stay in this mindset seem to thrive because challenges aren't threatening, they're part of learning. Setbacks aren't threatening, they give you information about what works and what doesn't. And research shows that whether you're a student or a business, this growth mindset fuels success.
And is this something that you just flick your fingers and you can jump into? Is this something like, or is it more like, I guess, having a gratitude practice or meditating where you've got to put in small steps every day and you get into that mindset over time? Is it an on-off switch, or is it something that we have to practice and rehearse and build into our, I guess it's coming from both your conscious and subconscious?
That's a great question. So often we're in a fixed mindset. We think our talents and abilities are fixed and we want to validate them and prove them all the time. And other times we're in more of a growth mindset, a place of learning and development. Sometimes it is a little like flipping a switch, but more often there is a journey that we have to take to keep ourselves in more of a growth mindset. Because there are so many things in our lives, in our jobs, that trigger us into a fixed mindset. If we pride ourselves on certain abilities and they're not looking so good at the moment, or we thought we had recruited a major client and it falls through, or a long-term client decides to go elsewhere, that's a blow. And that can trigger us back into a fixed mindset. What we have to do in those situations is understand that we've fallen back into a place that limits us, a place where we judge ourselves as no good, or decide not to take on the next challenge. And what we need to do then is really cajole ourselves back into, even I tell people, talk to that person, talk to that fixed mindset persona. Say, look, I understand how you feel. I understand why you want to protect me, but let's just see, what can we learn from that setback? Let's find out why that client didn't stay with us. Let's really arm ourselves for the next success.
And is the fixed mindset, as the word you just used then, is that designed and built into our brains to protect us. Is that what it's trying to do?
Yes, there's a way in which believing you have these fixed traits, then you know yourself, you know what you can expect, you know your limitations. It feels safe. And the voice in your head that says, don't go there, you might fail. Oh, look, you're struggling, maybe you're not good at it. Oh, look, it didn't work, do something safe. We have to appreciate it as something that is looking out for us, is trying to protect us, but is limiting us, is making the next success less likely.
What's the difference between the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset in the terms, and I imagine there is differences, it's not just semantics, but versus being a positive person or an optimist and a pessimist? Because there seems to be some similarities there.
You can be an optimist in both a fixed or a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you can be an optimist. You can say, hey, it's fixed and I have it. So great things are going to happen. The problem there is when bad things start happening, that could crumble. In a growth mindset, you're optimistic because you understand that you can engage in this process of hard work, finding good strategies, learning more that will increase your success over time. And if it doesn't work out, you go back to the drawing board and try to learn more rather than wanting to retreat.
So you mentioned the word journey as well. Is this something that just goes on forever? And the reason I ask this is that, so using me as the example of the podcast, we're growing month on month. We get between 10 and 25,000 downloads an episode now. And I'm putting in an insane amount of work to have this growth. And in my mind, I'm planning 2 or 3 years of just, crazy hours, crazy meetings, loads of shows, late at night. And I don't mind doing it for a set period of time. And obviously there's challenges, other things that we talked about, of the risks. I've got mentors, so I'm constantly developing. So I feel like I'm in this growth mindset. But as we're having this conversation, the thought of doing this forever until like the day I die is, I don't know, that then is forcing me to think about a fixed mindset might be a nice thing to have on occasion. Because this is a hell of a lot of work to keep going for another 30 years or until retirement age kind of thing. So do successful people go through stages of going one back and forth? Or are they just that driven and that determined that they're constantly in this growth mindset?
Yeah, so a growth mindset doesn't require you to lose sleep, et cetera, et cetera. It's the belief that you can grow and develop with hard work, good strategies, etc. If after your 3-4 years you want to do something else, fine. That's a decision. Or if you want to cut back and delegate more, that's a decision. You can be in a growth mindset and decide you don't want to do something. It doesn't mean you went into a fixed mindset. It doesn't mean you suddenly decided, no, my abilities can't be developed.
So there's a separation there between, this is really good, I enjoy this. So the fixed mindset is literally the ability to just not necessarily keep on going, and it's not the same as grit and just keeping like plodding along. It's the ability to look slightly bigger picture at things perhaps. And yeah, as you described, my 3 or 4 year 5 year plan is to have a little team around it so that I'm not spending 5 hours a day editing. I've got enough revenue to hire someone to do that, so the show goes on, so to speak. Yes. The audience don't see any difference, but my priorities change.
So a growth mindset allows you to project yourself into the future. You are creating strategies like training super competent staff that will allow you to reach your long-term goals. That's part of a growth mindset. And then again, even if you decided this wasn't for you and you went into something else entirely, it doesn't mean that you don't think you can grow and develop. It means you had a change of priorities.
So the irony of that would be that if you carried on going, you would be in a fixed mindset because that's just what you're used to and that's the routine, and that's exactly what you don't want.
Yeah, so you could, if you carried on, you could think, oh, this is all I'm good at. If I let up, the downloads will flag and I couldn't think as highly of myself. So that would be more fixed mindset thinking.
And how much of this then is what you're telling yourself, the story that you're constantly reiterating, or whether you're using things like affirmations or things of that nature? How much of going between these two mindsets is it that versus just not caring what other people think? Because it seems like the external side of things plays a big role in all of this.
Yes. It's the story you tell yourself. You can have a fixed mindset and not care what people think. It tends to orient you toward what people think because that's how you know how brilliant you are and amazing you are. But it could be about yourself. It's fixed. I have it. I'm a genius. I'm better than others. I'll always be that way. So it is the story you tell yourself about who you are. And out of that flows all these implications for what you do.
And how important within this, because it is being humble. I mean, and I'm intrigued with this because the words that you just described then and the phrases, if I told myself that I was the best and things like that constantly, I would turn into some crazy egotistical maniac. And I know my personality would allow me to become this. And we are the biggest sales podcast. We've grown there in like less than 9 months. We are doing really well. But if I kept telling myself things like that, my confidence, my head would be that big, I won't be able to walk through doors.
Yes.
And is there a point where your growth mindset, is there a limit to what it should become when you're telling yourself all these things? Or to have great success, do you have to be believing that much and perhaps twisting your own reality, if that makes sense?
When I see amazingly successful people whom I greatly admire, there's a humility. It's not a false humility. They're not self-denigrating, but they don't think they're better than others, even if they've had outlandish success. They're grateful for the success. They understand the process they engaged in to bring it there, but they don't think they deserve it or they're superior beings and they will always deserve it. They understand that they worked hard, they have abilities, but they're also lucky and grateful.
So they're seeing the journey as a whole rather than where they are in the moment.
And they focus on people who helped them, people who inspired them, as opposed to thinking that it was all them on their own because of their great genius.
Okay, let's get really practical with this for a second. Where or how do we start? If someone's listening to this, they've worked in sales for 3 or 4 years perhaps, they've got a nice little income coming in, they're happy, they're content. The problem with that is, of course, it could be swept away from you at any moment. So I assume you agree that you have to be constantly growing in business. Otherwise, if you're stood still, you're falling backwards. But they're in this fixed mindset and they're listening to this and they've tuned into a show like this. So they know something isn't quite right. They know they've got to drive and push and move forward. Otherwise, they wouldn't have tuned into a podcast for salespeople, for the salespeople to improve. What's the first step for them? Is it to have a sit down and just analyze the day-to-day thoughts, what they're thinking, and see if there's any negative things that's going through their brains? Or are there any... I'm not a big fan of affirmations. You might tell me otherwise, but is that the route to go down for this? How do they go about it?
I think you need to I think you need to start asking yourself every day, what am I learning? How am I improving? And notice when things go really well, what did you do? When things didn't go the way you hoped, what did you do? Notice new opportunities, because in today's world where everything's changing, a big product today could be defunct tomorrow. What are new opportunities? How can I take advantage of them? So just to stay in this place of learning, figure out the process that brings greater success, the process that brings lesser success. Just start getting into that learning mode.
To put this into practice, when it's very easy to get wrapped up in the day-to-day, when you've got reports and you've got your phone and you've got your iPhone watch bleeping at you, to put this into practice, do we just need to be more, not in the moment from a meditation perspective, but more aware and conscious of things and take a conscious effort to want to improve rather than just plod along? Is it as simple as that?
Yes, we need to make a conscious effort every day to improve, to say, what am I learning? What are my goals for learning today? And then at the end of the day, think, okay, what was new? What worked? What didn't work? What do I learn from it every day? Also, notice when self-judging or negative thoughts. You can be critical of yourself in a growth mindset, but you're critical of a process or strategy. You're not critical of your underlying abilities. So also try to start noticing when more critical, naysaying, undermining thoughts creep in, and get back into that learning mode.
Good stuff. Carol, I've got a couple of questions that I ask everyone that comes on the show. First one, what is one book or resource other than your own, which we'll come on to, that you'd recommend to the Salesman Podcast audience?
I really like Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, and his new book, Smarter, Faster, Better, probably in that order.
Yeah, I think Charles is coming on the show in the not too distant future, so that's interesting that you mentioned him. Mm-hmm. And final one, I know you don't work in sales, but clearly everyone has to sell and negotiate on occasion, so I'm sure you'll have an insight to this. If you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give her to help her become better at selling?
Go for it. Take on the challenge. Dream big and learn how to reach those goals. If you haven't reached them, you just say to yourself, not yet, not there yet. Go for it.
Amazing stuff. Carol, tell us a little bit more about your book and where we can find it.
The book is called Mindset. In the UK, the subtitle is How You Can Fulfill Your Potential. Although I think the publisher might be changing the subtitle a little, but Mindset, one word. And it shows how the two mindsets play out in education, business, relationships, and it talks about mindset change.
Good stuff. We'll link to it in the show notes over at salesman.red. And with that, Carol, I want to thank you for your insights, and I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
Wonderful. Wonderful to be here.
And there we have it. Carol, thank you for coming on the show. Massively appreciate your time. I'm going to do some more shows on the areas that kind of overlap between just sales and just becoming a better person, more successful in life in general. I think they're really useful, and I think this is a good platform to be able to share these stories and research and the science behind it all. So with that, expect some more of them, and I'll speak with you again tomorrow.